first blast that went off, I felt so small. I couldn't believe the power of the bomb. It was so powerful. I didn't know whether I would see another day or not.
The Price of Power: How the U.S. Failed Its Responsibilities to Protect the Human Rights of Veterans and Marshallese. From 1946 to 1958, the U.S. detonated 67 nuclear bombs in the Marshall Islands, forcibly displacing Marshallese from their homes and intentionally spreading fallout to inhabited atolls. The U.S. failed to uphold its responsibilities to protect the human rights of its service members and Marshallese who experienced the radiation. Instead of protecting its people, the U.S. violated many human rights, including the rights to life, health, and property. The nuclear bombs were experienced by many U.S. service members. When Marshallese returned, many got severely sick, and children experienced birth defects and ailments. Personnel contained the contaminated sand on some islands.
We didn't know. I didn't know anything about it, really. We had protection. T-shirts and dungarees.
These nuclear tests damaged many lives. The story is twisted with deceit and lies. The U.S. secured control over the Marshall Islands in 1944. Simultaneously, the first atom bomb was being created as part of the top-secret Manhattan Project. After Trinity's success, the U.S. dropped similar bombs over Japan, causing their surrender. The U.S. and its people rejoiced with a newfound feeling of patriotism. The bombs were heralded as a massive success. Cartoons celebrated the nuclear breakthroughs and glorified the destructive impacts they made. The bombs were advertised to the Marshallese as being for the good of mankind. Marshallese were bribed and coerced to leave and let the tests occur. It was the U.S.'s responsibility, after poisoning their soil, to declare that it is safe for them to return. Dr. Robert Cherry was the nuclear physicist and the radiation safety officer at Eniwetok Atoll during the cleanup.
They went to different atolls, but those atolls could not support them. They suffered quite a bit.
On remote Bikini Atoll in the Central Pacific, preparations are speeded for America's test of the atom bomb. This is a test which the Navy needs to answer many vital questions for the future. Out of the fire and smoke of the weapon that changed the thoughts of the entire world will come the United States Navy of the future.
The Cold War started in 1947 after a series of events that caused an extreme distrust between the US and the Soviet Union. One main reason for the Cold War was because the Soviets infiltrated the Manhattan Project, stealing critical information on the atomic bomb. This instilled a fear of atomic attack in the US. This fueled the US to continue the atomic bomb tests.
They wanted to make sure they had the bomb. They wanted to make sure the other countries knew that we had the bomb.
The specter of nuclear Armageddon overshadowed the globe, and in the United States the understanding that the bomb could also someday be used against the United States brought the first chills to the Cold War. Hundreds of thousands of veterans experienced the 105 secret bomb tests throughout the Pacific Proving Grounds. Fred Schaefer is an Operation Dominic veteran.
We were on a secret mission that we couldn't talk about, and they threatened us with treason if we did talk about it. When the bomb went off, you could see your bones in your fingers, and you could see an x-ray of the man standing in front of you.
In 1954, Operation Castle was initiated, the largest H-bomb ever to be detonated by the U.S. Castle Bravo was roughly as powerful as 15 megatons of TNT, nearly 1,000 times greater than those dropped on Japan. The U.S. government stated that it only predicted the bomb to be 6 to 8 megatons. However, in 1995, a Joint Task Force 7 report was discovered that wrote that the U.S. actually predicted a blast of 12 to 20 megatons, 2 to 3 times what they had originally stated. People on nearby atolls such as Rongelap experienced vomiting, burns, nausea, hair loss, and later cancer.
They could see stuff coming out of the sky, and they got some beta burns. Children were playing, and they got beta burns from the fallout.
The crew of a Japanese fishing boat was also seriously impacted. It was the U.S.'s responsibility to keep them safe. Benedict Kabua Madison is a Bikinian descendant and the CEO of the Marshallese Educational Initiative.
There was a secret medical study called Project 4.1. The purpose of it was not to help people with their health issues. The purpose of the program was to study the impact of radiation on human beings. We were pretty much lab rats.
In fact, the U.S. was planning Project 4.1 before Castle Bravo even happened. Service members were also severely harmed. Paul Batchelder participated in Operation Hardtack 1 in the Air Force at Eniwetok.
One of the blasts went off and the airplane flew through the clouds gathering radioactive materials. They put me on a decontamination crew to wash the aircraft down with no protection gear at all. Just didn't know. Or they did know, but they wouldn't tell me what the radiation effects would be.
Although the reported doses weren't extremely high, the U.S. directly stated that the radiation film badges were highly inaccurate and the doses were simply estimates. The Soviet Union detonated the Tsar Bomba in 1961 with a record yield of about 57 megatons.
And the U.S. wanted to answer. The British had Christmas Island, and evidently they invited the U.S. to join in with them, and both of them could reap the same harvest of their tests.
In 1963, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom signed the treaty banning nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater. Marshallese returned to Bikini in the late 60s after they were told the atoll was safe. Almost immediately, they became extremely sick. Many children were born with genetic differences and health problems. Marshallese were evacuated once again. The U.S. had failed its responsibilities to protect their right to life. From 1977 to 1980, roughly 6,000 servicemen cleaned up the radioactive sand on Eniwetok, which soldiers had previously laid face down upon during tests. Wearing shorts and t-shirts, they placed this radioactive material under a concrete dome. These veterans lived and breathed the radioactive dust. The radiation from the bombs impacted thousands of people. Many have criticized the government for its handling of the issues because of the testing. Operation Castle personnel averaged 1.7 rems of radiation, nearly 20 times the average American's dose. The highest dose was nearly 100 rems, which is harmful and can cause acute radiation syndrome and a decrease in white blood cells. Barely more than 4 times this dose could be lethal to 50% of the population in 30 days. In the long term, this increases cancer and other disease risks and lowers fertility.
One of the medics said that you'd be lucky to father any children at all because of the high level of radiation you absorbed.
The veteran children and grandchildren can be affected. Birth defects, that is probably going to be the biggest one, and this can go for 10 generations.
Although the government was still only beginning to understand the technology, they knew more than they were telling and they obscured the truth. The U.S. has the responsibility to help veterans with these problematic human rights violations. The Marshallese were impacted most adversely. There was an extremely high amount of stillbirths and miscarriages.
And women gave birth to jellyfish babies, babies who had no eyes, no head, no arms. We describe them as grapes.
This radiation overexposure came from when the U.S. told the Marshallese that it was safe to return to Rongelap in 1957 after Castle Bravo, which was evacuated again not by the U.S. but by Greenpeace, and to Bikini in the late 60s. The United States Atomic Energy Commission later stated that the Marshall Islands were, by far, the most contaminated place in the world. Long-term effects are difficult to trace back to radiation.
As you get older, things happen to you. A lot of my fellow veterans believe they got big doses and the stuff that's happening to them, cancer, other diseases, well, they blame it on Eniwetok. There's no way of proving it did. There's no way of proving it didn't.
This prevents many radiation survivors from filing a claim against the government. Despite this, the dose was notable enough for the government to offer compensation, although they don't tell veterans.
The veteran had to ask the government just wasn't being fair about it.
However, what is even harder to prove is emotional damage.
After all of these years, I still have that fear. It never leaves my mind.
The U.S. has formally apologized for its nuclear legacy, but it hasn't totally accepted its responsibilities to make things right with the veterans and the Marshallese, and has rather disregarded veterans and Marshallese human rights.
And still, today, they aren't real fair about it. Was it worth it?
These tests poisoned, killed, mentally scarred, and diseased many people. The government displaced the islanders, destroyed much of their culture, and they fail to this day to accept their responsibilities in this matter. It is argued that the U.S. has fixed its problems by offering major veteran benefits. However, they do not tell veterans about this, so many argue that it makes no difference. The atrocities that have been done to the Marshallese are irreversible and unforgivable.
It's too bad why we moved these people off their land and then blew it up with atomic weapons.
The U.S. took advantage of the fact that they were an enormously powerful country and the Marshall Islands was not. The world may never recover from the tests in the Pacific, tests riddled with patriotism and pride and fear. The U.S. failed its responsibilities, and the legacy will endure.
you.